very normal response to the sound of bullets is to run in the opposite direction. But there's these people who are trained to move towards it. And obviously they have a different role, they have different training, they have different equipment. But that applies to us too, right? We entrepreneurs who move towards risk instead of running away from it, we have a different role. We have different training. We have different equipment. That's sort of what we teach now. I mean, police officer, it would be the bulletproof vest and the weapon and all that stuff. And for an entrepreneur, it would be the understanding of finance and the understanding of salesmanship. It's the same idea, though. It's that you take that thing that most people are terrified of and you move towards it. And for a police officer, obviously the success looks like taking a dangerous situation and basically making it not dangerous anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And for an entrepreneur, it's to move towards risk and then to essentially turn something risky into something much less risky. Mm-hmm. So if you say, I'm going to invent a new piece of software, well, there's a lot of risk there. But now look 5 years down the road and the software has a marketplace and it has a predictable financial model. You've taken all that risk and turned it into something much less risky.
Welcome to Constructive Interference, where visionaries sharpen visionaries. I'm your host, Rufus Cressend, diving into the minds of those who dare to dream big and innovate boldly. Join me as we explore their stories, uncover their challenges, and learn from their journeys. Let's get inspired and sharpen our visions together. Welcome to an episode of Constructive Interference. Today's guest is Lewis Schiff, and I met Lewis, about 3 years ago, went through the fellowship program at the Birthing of Giants, and we connected there, and I've been very engaged in the community since, and I'm really honored to have him on our podcast today to talk about things visionary and business. And so welcome, Lewis.
Oh, Rufus, any time I get to spend with you is good times.
I would agree with that. So, Lewis, let's kind of start at the beginning, I guess. Again, as we know, we met through Birthing of Giants, but where was your origins? How did you get started with Birthing of Giants?
Well, if I'm going to go a little bit farther back, because I was toiling away as an entrepreneur in the 1990s. Mm-hmm. I built some stuff that I sold. It was the beginning of the .com era. I had some cutting edge things I started. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because I never actually used the word entrepreneur. If anyone ever asked me to describe myself, it never occurred to me that what I was doing was called being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And that tells you a bit about the word, the sort of vocation of being an entrepreneur. It's relatively new, okay? Like years earlier, it took guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs to kind of tell the world, hey, there's this person called an entrepreneur who can build stuff. And I came of age in that time. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I really toiled away starting things and occasionally selling things for 10 years, 15 years before I happened to stumble into Inc. magazine's offices, where a friend of mine had become the editor-in-chief. And I shared with him a book I had written, which was about self-made millionaires, self-made wealth in America and how it comes about. It's called The Middle Class Millionaire. And it was a research-based book. And he is telling me about a group of people called the Inc. 5000. Inc. 5000 are companies whose revenues are growing quickly, and they're run by, people like us, regular people who start companies with whatever they have in their bank account or whatever their credit card can handle. And they build these businesses. And of course, they're entrepreneurs. But it hadn't occurred to me that I was an entrepreneur. If you can imagine this, because things like this don't happen anymore, I walked into his office around 4 p.m. when we had an appointment. We didn't stop talking till midnight, where we were just talking about what I had learned about how what's called American dynamism. How does economic mobility take place in America? How does a regular person become a wealthy person? Not as interesting to us was how a wealthy person stays wealthy, but how does a regular person become wealthy? Okay. And that conversation went till midnight. And by the end of it, we had agreed that we would help to develop a community of people who would get together, who were bounded by the fact that they were the company owners of Inc. 5000 companies. And I started this community around the country. It would take me another few more years to figure out that 10 years earlier, Inc. magazine had started something called Birthing of Giants. I promised I was going to get there. I know that took a while. And so after running a community of business owners for a bunch of years for Inc. In a joint venture, I learned that what was missing from that approach was it just was a group of people who got together periodically. We'd get together once a month and I'd bring in a cool speaker. It was formless and shapeless. It was exciting, and people still talk about it, but it wasn't structured. Birthing a Giants, which had existed 10 or 20 years earlier, probably 15 years earlier at that point, that had been started by EO and Inc. magazine, as a partnership,
Sure.
had a kind of a beginning and a middle and end. It had a framework, and that was interesting to me. And so eventually I had the opportunity to buy Birthing a Giants, and I bought it and rebooted it just to match the moment, a little bit more working with people's schedules in a new way, and a little more accommodating to how fast innovation takes place now. It's not a static program. And so that's how I got started with Birthing a Giants. It was the year 2017. Inc. magazine owned it. A little bit of time passed. I ended up owning it and rebooted it. And it continues to develop, but the faculty has always been these amazing post-exit entrepreneurs who, have been there and done that. There's nothing else you could say about it. Entrepreneurs need to know what they're going to do based on talking to people who have done it. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's always kind of been my formula for success. If I am wanting to do something and I don't know how to do it, the fastest path is to go ask someone that's already doing it and say, how did you do it?
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised that most people are probably flattered that you came and recognized that they are a success and you're wanting to learn from them, but other people were more than happy to sell it to you. And I think that's often the fastest path versus having to learn that wisdom on your own. But as you're kind of telling the story, a book that comes to mind is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So It's kind of that same kind of story of even being commissioned by Andrew Carnegie to study the Rockefellers, the Carnegie himself, but J.P. Morgan, all these at the time the richest people in the world, to figure out what was that it factor, what was that common thread. And the culmination of the book really just came out to be this law of expectations, that is that mindset. So it's similar as far as you studying the Inc. 5000 and trying to figure out, okay, what was that it factor? What makes people successful and what makes people not successful, and what are the habits and the behaviors and the disciplines that they have to have, and then forming that into a curriculum that you actually bring to the Birthing a Giants I think is a great way to go buy that wisdom and participate in that wisdom, but not only have access to the board and the faculty of the people who have been there and done that, but have the people that are going through that journey at the same time with you. And I think it's hard to say where the bigger value is for me being part of that community, is the things that I learned through the fellowship, or is it the relationships that I have with people that are just kind of shoulder to shoulder with me and in the trenches, learning those things at the same time. And their challenges are different than mine, but they rhyme, right? They have that same fundamental challenges, and so that's kind of what I hear there. But so what's your dream for this organization? What do you want to see it become?
Well, I believe that this person called an entrepreneur, and the approximately 2 or 3% of us who have that orientation are incredibly important to the world, because they innovate, and they innovate in so many ways. You have to open up your idea of what innovation means. Innovation obviously could mean products, hardware, software, tech, blah, blah, blah. But it could also mean culture. It could mean, how do people come to work every day and get motivated? How are they compensated? What happens to a company, that creates value over time, and how does it go liquid? Innovation comes in so many forms. And so this group of people, again, 2 to 3% of the population, who have this kind of risk tolerance for innovating. They look at something that's never been done before and they say, that sounds interesting. And most people say, it's never been done before. I can't get out of here fast enough. So these 2 to 3% who say, that sounds interesting. I mean, there's just not an innovation in the world. As I look behind you and I see lights, and I imagine you're in air conditioning, if that's, the right thing. I mean, the amount of innovation we surround ourselves with today is just off the charts. But there's always a story of one of these 2 or 3% people who said, I think I can do that. And I know that doesn't exist, but I think I can make that. And they found a marketplace. They came up with the ability to scale it up, and they could deliver it profitably. They can deliver on their promise profitably. So the long-term vision for Birthing a Giants is definitely just to contribute more to that. Meaning, I think not to kind of play an old song here, but I think the way we come up is a little harder than it has to be. I
Mm-hmm.
think that our generation of entrepreneurs, and Rufus, you and I are probably close in age, is we have venerated this thing called the School of Hard Knocks. I don't think I used to embrace that, and now I think that's a lot of wasted energy,
Mm-hmm.
because you can learn what you don't know, and then you can bring all that kind of risk orientation to do the new and to try the new and be willing to experiment, and you can put them together. But the old way of saying, I have to be scrappy, I have to sweat everything out. I mean, it's romantic, but it's not particularly helpful. And maybe that's okay, right? We can kind of let those things coexist. So if somebody in the Birthing a Giants community like yourself is going to innovate in a way that helps your clients, maybe it's going to help your community, maybe it's going to help your industry, maybe it's going to make you very, very rich, is the goal of Birthing a Giants is to facilitate all of that, And to do
Right.
that, we have to disentangle you a bit, because even what you said earlier, being shoulder to shoulder with your peers, what that speaks to, because I've spent, so much of my life with entrepreneurs, it speaks to the loneliness of being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You can address loneliness very directly by saying, let's all get in a room together periodically and let's restore and rejuvenate
I'll be lonely together.
be lonely together. And you create vulnerability and you create trust, and those things matter, and they can help you be a better innovator. And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, there's technical things you don't know how to do that'll make you a better innovator. So I'm just not into, I have done a full 180 on the School of Hard Knocks. From that's what makes me better than, the people I came up with is my
Mm-hmm.
kind of mental toughness, grit, to while I do need that stuff to succeed, it's not my contribution to society is going to be successfully innovating, really bringing something to market. Again, whether it's cultural, whether it's financial, whether it's product, and making the world a better place because of that.
Now that's important. I think in terms of the advice that I would even give to my younger self to even recognize that now is that I think when we were younger, it's like if we didn't do it, we didn't really earn it. We had to prove ourselves. We had to kind of go and really grind it out and work more hours than anybody else. But as you mature and you put that ego aside a little bit and you're brave enough to become vulnerable to say, you know what, I'm scared. I'm worried about this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah,
going to let someone else know that and ask for help.
yeah,
And there's the who's in our lives that we need to connect with that can help us find the hows, and versus us just being obsessed with the how all the time.
yeah.
So
Very
I
well
think
put.
you're right. There was a lot of wasted time with me just trying trial and error, a lot of wasted money, a lot of time away from my family, things, other passions that I deserve to be a part of, but I was spending it on doing this myself because I had these idols of or images of what I'm supposed to be or the person I'm supposed to become, to where I said it was maybe a pride thing that just didn't allow me to just be vulnerable enough to ask for help. So I think that's important. And when you say the loneliness of the entrepreneur, and just for the record, I kind of interchange entrepreneur with visionary, and visionary is kind of that 3 to 5%
Yeah,
of the people out there too. But yeah, no, so it's so important to find there's kind of your tribe, if you will, the other people that are like you, that are in that part of that journey, that can be brave enough to be vulnerable with you, especially. And I tell you, when I first joined the organization, that was a big thing for me, is that that imposter syndrome of, do I deserve to be here? So I'm kind of putting my best foot forward and my best mask that I could put on that says, hey, I got my shit together, and I don't want to get kicked out of this tribe. I want to be accepted, so I have to know things. I got to be smart. And it wasn't about that. It's like,
yeah,
dude, let it go, man. We're all just as messed up as you are, and we're all just figuring out. Yes, we have certain successes, but we didn't get there easily. We asked for people help in achieving those things. So yes, it's okay for you to come in and not know what the hell's going on. So now I really changed my mindset to where I look to be the dumbest person in almost every room I can be in, because that's when I know I'm really learning. And I'm it's like when I played tennis as a kid. And when you get better at tennis, don't play people at your level, play people that are better than you, and make sure that's the
Yeah.
only way to get better. So anyway, you also mentioned something interesting too, is that tolerance for risk. Um, do you think that is the it factor for the entrepreneur and for the visionary, the appetite for risk, the people that are willing to do what other people aren't willing to do?
Yeah, I speak a lot about, this person called a police officer or a firefighter or a soldier, and how they're just their orientation is to move towards risk. They're very different kind of risk than you and I do, of course. The
Hmm.
sound of bullets,
Hmm.
is a very normal response to the sound of bullets is to run in the opposite direction. But there's these people who are trained to move towards it. And obviously, they have a different role, they have different training, they have different equipment. But that applies to us too, right? We entrepreneurs who move towards risk instead of running away from it, we have a different role. We have different training. We have different equipment. That's sort of what we teach now. I mean, in a police officer, it would be the bulletproof vest and the weapon and all that stuff. And for an entrepreneur, it would be the understanding of finance and the understanding of salesmanship. It's the same idea, though. It's that you take that thing that most people are terrified of and you move towards it. And for a police officer, obviously the success looks like taking a dangerous situation and basically making it not dangerous anymore, right?
Hmm.
And for an entrepreneur, it's to move towards risk and then to essentially turn something risky into something much less risky.
Hmm.
So if you say, I'm going to invent a new piece of software, well, there's a lot of risk there. But now look 5 years down the road and the software has a marketplace and it has a predictable financial model. You've taken all that risk and turned it into something much less risky using your tools and your equipment, just like a
Hmm.
police officer would. And that's the
So
it. That's the it.
so why do we do that though? Why do we run towards that risk? Why do we feel the yearning to go and do things that most people wouldn't even attempt?
I mean, my simple answer is ask a cop that, why has a
Hmm.
cop become a cop? I mean, think about what a cop's day is like in terms of how many times a day they come across even anything. Just any one person on the street is a potential
Hmm.
situation, right? So why
Sure.
does a cop do that for their 8 hours a day? That's a good question.
Right.
It's not the pay. There's other ways to make that salary,
Right.
So I think that there's these people around us who move towards risk in different ways, and asking them that is like saying, why do you get up in the morning? It's just who they are. And there's teachability there. You can teach someone, like you'd have to teach that person who's hero oriented how to be a good cop. And
Right.
probably some of them are not good cops. Probably some of them are reckless or something,
Right.
bad. But someone who's oriented that way plus the training is a really valuable person. And someone who's oriented towards risk like entrepreneurs plus the training is a really
Right.
powerful person.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. Is that something that you're either have it or you don't? You're born with it. It can be refined, or you don't have it and it can be taught.
Again, I would say ask your employees how they feel about risk.
Right. Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Thank God we have these people in our lives who, the way I look at it is if you're one person and you've got 10 people working for you, probably they're saying, thank heavens that Rufus likes this stuff because I don't. And
Right.
then you're saying, thank heavens they like doing that stuff because I don't.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know what would happen if you made someone be an entrepreneur. I imagine it would have a lot of negative impact on their
Right.
selves.
Yeah, and I don't want to be pretentious about it and be like, hey, you don't have the DNA, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. If you don't, if you weren't born with it, you just shouldn't attempt it. But
I
I
don't think
think
that's pretentious.
there are certain natural personality traits that you either have certain tendencies that will make you successful as an entrepreneur, and there's other things that will not. And I think it's to know thyself to say, yes, you should be an employee and look for stability versus you don't approach risk the right way. It just gives you too much anxiety, or you just
Yeah.
don't have the right mindset for it. So I think that's, just to say anybody and everybody can go out there and be a visionary is, I think that would be an irresponsible statement. Um,
Yeah.
but like I said, I don't want to say we're
And
exclusive.
the ratio is what it is. I mean, there's more. non-visionaries than there are visionaries,
Right.
which is
Right.
fine.
Yeah. I mean, I look at the risk in the things that I do as kind of almost as fun as I wonder how this is going to turn out. I'm curious to see what's on the other side of this. So I think it's that dopamine that we're looking
Yeah.
for, that rush to find the answer, to see how this plays out, or even just some cases just to learn something new and approach that failure in that way. So I think that's a great segue. I mean, so even in your book, Business Brilliant, and you don't talk about that book enough, by the way. I think it's really, really well done. I enjoyed that book. But your
Yeah.
approach to risk is interesting. Not a risk, but your approach to the failure from that risk. And it's almost, well, I'll let you talk about it. How do you approach failures in business and failures in your own personal ventures?
Right. Well, you mentioned the imposter complex a while ago, which you and I have chatted about here and there. I totally understand why people feel like imposters. I just think it's completely useless as a feeling. I mean, meaning towards the pursuit of a goal, because
Hmm.
anybody can be a world changer and an innovator. And so, the fact that they question that just slows them down.
Hmm.
And so there comes a stage when you have failed much more than once. I have failed. I'm up to 20 failures easily at this point. My favorite entrepreneur, he has a business card that says the hits on one side, and it lists like the 5 things he's done that have worked. And you flip the business card, it says the misses, and it's like 20 different things.
Right.
And that's sort of the chest beating part of entrepreneurship. We are going to fail more than we're going to succeed. And for sure, my journey, and I know this is true of a lot of entrepreneurs, of being comfortable with failure has changed a lot from when I was young and my ego was really tied up in early success. And later on, when I realized that failing is such a productive experience because you learn so much from failure, you know, you sit around at a bar with entrepreneurs, none of them talk about their successes. They talk about the low points. They talk about what they learned when they ran out of money, or what they've learned from sweating out payroll, or what they've learned from coming up against a wall, because there's so much more to be learned in a failure than there is in a success. And there's two, I would say, secrets about success that are not positive. One is there's not that much to learn from success. I mean, you
Hmm.
think there would be, but there isn't. There's much more to learn from failure. And two is, I have been around people who had early success, let's say in their 20s and stuff like that. I would say it messes them up for the rest of their lives because they love that feeling of success and they just want to capture it and recapture it and recapture it. I was reading about a billionaire recently, and I have my own experience with billionaires that matches this, which is that they put themselves in such a bubble that they don't even understand how the world works anymore. You assume they do because they're billionaires, but they actually don't. They surround themselves with all these yes people who are on their payroll, and they lose touch with how the world works. And I don't think that's a really good outcome for success, is that you
Right.
lose touch of how the world works. So I think failure is the best learning opportunity in the world. Learning how to have your ego survive failure, learning how to have your knowledge bank improved through failure. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what I wrote about in Business Brilliant. It's all the ways that failure is a positive for this community. And
Hmm.
also the total misunderstanding about failure, that when people see entrepreneurs fail and then kind of go back at it, they conclude that those entrepreneurs are just different than them. But I
Hmm.
would argue that entrepreneurs are hurt just as badly by every failure. It's just that magical moment when they say, yeah, I was hurt, but I still need to do this. I still need to try. I think it's a misunderstanding to think that we're not hurt by our failures. I think it's just what we do next is different from everybody else.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of shame that we tend to carry sometimes with those failures, and to let that shame go that says there's nothing wrong with you. You did
Right.
something, it didn't work. You pick yourself and you do something different. And I love this saying, and I try to say it as much as I can in the office, just to have that mindset and with the team and say, look, we either do things and we win, or we do things and we learn. And it's
Yes.
not, so it's there's a positive outcome in both scenarios. And I also find, especially in failure, the sooner you start looking for that silver lining or that lesson, the sooner you tend to find it. And either if you stay in that failure mindset too long, you're just in this victim mindset. And victims are not empowered. Victims are
Yeah.
victims, right? And I think that's part of me is that I cannot stand to be a victim because it feels so out of control for me. And I don't
Yeah.
like to feel out of control. So how do I take back control over the things that I can control? Obviously, I can only control the things that I can do and my surrounding, influence other things. But I think the sooner you can say, okay, this didn't work, I've changed my mind, I'm going in a different direction, is the mark of a great leader, I think, is versus saying, I'm just going to keep doing the wrong thing in hopes that one day it turns out to be the right thing. And it's frustrating for our employees a lot of the times too, because it tends to give them organizational whiplash every time I change
Mhm.
direction of where we're going. It's like, Rufus, we just got used to the last thing you told us you wanted us to do. I'm like, yes, but that's not working. Well, you didn't give it enough time. I'm like, maybe you're right, but I have to trust my instincts. These are my risk.
Right.
And that's just that mindset that says, if one can, one must, and it's like, I have a great idea. And I think a lot of my creativity comes from inherently being lazy. And I have to find a more efficient way to get to the other side of what I'm trying to do. And like, I see what all the things that other people are doing. And that kind of goes back to the beginning of what we talked about, is that wisdom of being able to not have to be in the trenches and do it on your own. You can surround yourself with people that can help you get there. Is just that just makes more sense to me than to just to stay in this pit of despair. So anyway.
Yeah, no, all of that's true. I mean, and it's great to talk about it, but I also would want to say let's also stop talking about it and let's start looking about how to be the best innovators, the best visionaries we can be, because for some of us, the outcome is going to be those 10 people who work for us have really great lives because of it.
Mhm.
For some, it'll be we invent a new product or service that changes the world or anything in between. But we should worry about ourselves and think about ourselves and learn about ourselves. And then we should also say, what else do I need to know? Right. So
Mhm.
this would be, you could be an athlete and you could eat well and you could do everything right by your body. But then there are times when you need intervention from a hospital or a surgeon or whatever. And the point being, it's a combination of you doing the right things to be the best version of yourself and then you expressing that out in a way that the world can benefit from.
Right.
Both.
So other than your origin stories of, with the Inc. 5000 and creating the Birth into Giants, or taking it to a different level, what's kind of your earliest memories that said, you know what, I'm different, I am an entrepreneur, I am a visionary? Does anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, that's a funny question because, so again, I did not have the word entrepreneur, but I was one of those kids who started stuff, whether it was the lemonade stand or, other
Mhm.
things. And I just remember having these fights with the people I'm still friends with, literally my childhood friends, fights. I was
Mhm.
very arrogant and I was really obnoxious. And I would be like, you have to start something and build something. Why aren't you out there with your lemonade stand? I was so obnoxious about it. I
Right.
can't believe they're still my friends. But over the years, I realized that I was right, meaning for me, I could not see the world in any other way. And I do
Mhm.
know those people today, and a couple of them are actually entrepreneurs. Some of them are what I call entrepreneurial.
Mhm.
They live their lives in a way that's got real risk. They could be, for example, salespeople. Salespeople have real risk in their lives. And so I admire that quality in people. I mean, that's Rufus. I get to spend time with people like you and that whole shoulder to shoulder thing. I see a room full of entrepreneurs and the way they buzz and the way they work the room. I know some people find that like also arrogant and obnoxious. It's too sort of they're too predatorial. Like they need to know what they don't know, and they want to get the connection that they don't have. I look at that and I say, this is great. These people are making things happen. I love
Mhm.
that quality. 40
Mhm.
years later, I still love that quality. My earliest memories of it are just saying, I think this can be done, so I will do it. I think this can be done, so I will do it.
Right. I think, and it's, I think we all have a bit of that first memory of whether it be, selling, stuff, that artwork that I, made at home, or lemonade stand, or delivering newspapers, whatever the case might be. But I think it's the passion that existed around it and the frustration that came with that passion that everyone else didn't see what you saw. And isn't that's where that frustration, like, how are you not doing this? This makes so much sense. And you didn't know how to articulate the passion that you had for behind what you were doing. And it's like, that's one of those things that either you have it or you don't. And I think just to most people will settle for so much less. Or they just have passions about other things that don't involve starting a
Sure.
business or making money. And that's perfectly fine. But I think that's where I started really noticing. It was like, is there something wrong with me? Because why aren't people as engaged with some of these things that I'm doing? Why are people leaving at 5 o'clock? They're starting a business. Who has the luxury of leaving at 5 o'clock? So it was just that the frustration of like, either like I'm just stupid and I'm not like everybody else and they got it all figured out, or I'm just frustrated that they haven't figured out how I'm doing it. So that was where I started to differentiate and say, there is a certain it factor. Maybe running into that burning building is one of them, but the passion to run into that burning building is a key element of that.
Yeah, and you just call yourself stupid, which of course is not the right description at all. But it is really no different than an artist who says,
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you when this painting is done. I will know when I have finished this painting.
Mm-hmm.
Or the athlete who says, I will know when I'm done, working out or practicing or training for the day. Those people are working with an internal model that motivates them, that animates them. And so
Mm-hmm.
when other people don't see that model, when they don't see how did he know when the painting was finished? I don't know. That was just internal model. But when you were talking about that, I was also thinking about the number of times and the number of ways that I've jumped into doing something just because it hadn't been done before,
Mm-hmm.
not asking this critical question: am I the right person to try to do this? I mean, I have done a lot of things that I was the wrong person to try to do. And that's okay too, but that was painful. That's kind of school of hard knocks stuff. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
wasted energy.
Oh, I've started many businesses, and while I was neglecting this business, and I always came back to the same time I was spending doing that, I could have spent it over here and done so much more with my unique abilities and talents and so on. I mean, I had a vending business at one point to where I got an opportunity to buy in really cheap and buy some vending machines. So here I am. Early in my career, I didn't always wear polo shirts and t-shirts to work, but I wore a suit. So during the day, out in the summer, I'm carrying cases of soda and changing out soda vending machines because that was my little
Yeah.
side business, and I'm sweating my what off in this Louisiana summer heat. And I'm like, what am I doing? And then the other venture that comes to mind is I had a couple of fourplexes, and I'm like, okay, I want to be in the real estate business. There's a lot of money, and I have nothing against real estate business. I think it's a fantastic business to be in. But I was the one that was shampooing carpets on a Saturday morning. I'm like, yeah, this is exactly why I went to school, just to shampoo carpets on a Saturday for Section 8 housing. Yeah. So it was just that reality check. Oh, and my favorite one is before they had Storage Wars. That show they have Storage Wars where, I don't know, you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
me and my wife actually we did do that. We used to go to these storage facilities, and because I've always liked going to garage sales. I went with my grandparents when I was younger, and it was just fun just going junking, and
Mm.
I pretty much furnished my first house from garage sale finds. But we kind of that elevated into going to these storage auctions, and they were fun.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's very territorial, and the show is very accurate, by the way. So I have cute little blonde wife and me, and of course the people that were the regulars, they did not want me bidding. They wanted to kind of basically jack up the price so I wouldn't win anything, so we wouldn't come back. They wanted to keep their close knit, and there's their lone little network. And I said, all right, Lisa, here's how high we're willing to go. You go up front and start bidding. And all these old men, they're like, oh, let's let Lisa have this one. And so that was our little hack for that. But anyway, so we're unboxing everything. And when you buy these storage units, you have to take everything out. So we're bringing it all home, and our dining room's full of all this crap. And we would do our garage sale. This is earlier on. And it was finally, my wife said, Rufus, I really don't want to be a junk dealer anymore. And it was those words that hit me. I'm like, you're absolutely right. I am a professional junk dealer. I'm not being a professional financial planner. So I had to kind of recenter because it was something that was fun that I was like, hey, we could make a business out of it. But it never occurred to me
Well,
that you shouldn't be making a business out of this.
well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, also, to use the word junk. I mean, one man's junk is another man's treasure. You could have been the king of junk dealers. You could have, there's a business
Gary
in that.
Vee talks about that all the time. He's going to garage sales too, and buying coffee mugs and putting them on eBay and making lots of money. So it can
Yeah.
work,
I
but
mean, there's someone
it
out there.
wasn't for me to do it.
You
Yeah.
correct. That's the thing. It wasn't your thing, but how do you know
So,
until you do it?
yeah. So going back to passion though. So what are you passionate about now? Now that we have Birth into Giants is a successful organization, and it's continuing to grow and make a meaningful impact into the world of entrepreneurs. What's kind of your next thing that you're either a vertical integration or side project, or what are you excited about right now?
Right. So, I had this opportunity to work over at Oxford University for the past few years where I was bringing over American business owners and we were exposing ourselves to really cutting edge technology. I mean, if you wanted to hear what the kinds of things that they're thinking about in Oxford, it would take me a while to walk through some of them, but they're science fiction. They're science fiction. And so
Mm-hmm.
we would go there and see it, and we would have a chance to help them. In some cases, we made investments or we supported them in some fashion. But what it made me clear on is the continuum from the let's say the junk dealer, who's really that kind of job is to kind of find market discrepancies and take advantage of it, to the person who's inventing, a way to create cancer medicine in space. Okay, because we saw that. How do you create cancer medicine in space? And they're the same person. It's just that they're taking on a different part of the value chain. So the one who's saying I can find price discrepancies and make my business out of that is one part of the value chain. And the person who says I can think up, ways to use a zero gravity environment to create a medicine is another part of the value chain. And so the thing I'm passionate about these days is just taking the energy of entrepreneurship that flows through Birthing a Giants and directing it towards changing the world. And that could be something as out there as helping a space medicine factory get built. But it
Mm-hmm.
could also be, the junk dealer saying, we have a way of training the next generation of junk dealers, to use, to sort of refine their pricing method or and of course the middle ground for that would be what we're now faced with, which is AI and blockchain, right? So AI, everyone's starting to grok a bit like AI is this pretty serious
Right.
amplifier of anything, but one of those things could be entrepreneurship and innovation. And the second piece, which is not as popular yet or has had a hard run, is blockchain. And so blockchain is the 21st century way of creating something called liquidity. So I grew up in New York City, okay? And so we had a lot of Wall Street people around every neighborhood, whether that was that you were the low end of the Wall Street world or the high end, but Wall Street people. And when you'd ask them what was important about what they did, they would say, without the capital markets, without the stock market, without the banks, whatever part of them they were in, the whole thing would seize, right? You need capital to make capitalism work. And so, on the one hand, what we would see in New York, and I'm going to make fun of that group now because I grew up with them, is they have these really nice suits and they have these great beach houses, and they're really, really well compensated. But they'll tell you what they do is so important. They lubricate things. They lubricate the financial markets, which makes everything work. And you do this in your business too, Rufus. This is what you are. And what I understand now is that the raw energy of an innovator, of a visionary who keeps pushing against, headwinds, about whatever it is they're interested in innovating around, plus capital is the formula, right? And so I think I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how these visionaries fit well with the capital markets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder than you think because visionaries come into things as, sort of risk managers. They come into things as leaders, but they don't really. This is what I say all the time now to audiences, especially if I want to provoke them, as I say, you're a practicing capitalist that doesn't really understand capitalism that well. And it's true. Entrepreneurs don't understand capitalism that well.
Right.
And so that's my passion. And so now, how do we do that? Well, on the one hand, we have these things called regional cohorts, which are launching in cities around the country. So you could be in Dallas or you can be in North Carolina, and you can start working with a cohort a dozen other business owners who are on the same journey. And 2 years later, you're going to be a much better capitalist. And while that word is sort of out of favor, it sort of sounds like provocative. What I mean is you understand how capital works, right? And that's super important. Entrepreneurs don't understand how capital works well enough. So they toil away, but they don't create nearly as much value as they can for themselves and for the people that they love. So that's part one, is creating places in your town that you can go to learn capitalism as a practicing capitalist. And then the other side of that is going to be, can I create the capital market systems that approach a business owner with what we call founder-friendly terms, right? So this really comes down to, and I'll give you a little visual in a minute, it comes down to, how do we make business owners more capital friendly, and how do we make capital more business owner friendly?
Right.
And it's not too different, and I talk about this a lot, not too different from the high school dance, where you got the boys on one side and the girls on the other. And the girls would love nothing more than for the boys to approach them and say how pretty you are and all the things that they want to hear. And the boys are leaning against their wall, hoping the girls will approach them and saying how cool you are and how moody you are. And
Groovy, yes. I've always looked for that compliment, yes.
And so you need capital and business owner to step closer to each other and have more understanding of each other in order to create the output, which is more vision and innovation.
That's a great metaphor. I really, really like that. And I'm still getting my mind wrapped around I'm a professional lubricator, but no, I get the metaphor, but I'm like, that sounds provocative. But no, you're right. It's the reality is that so many of these entrepreneurs are somewhat accidental business owners, and they never really made the shift in their role of being that highly skilled technician that is on a great product or a great service and is just doing a lot of it and scaled it, but transitioning to that owner and that leadership and that executive that the company deserves and needs. And I think that's that lubrication is saying, hey, you need to understand this part of business because you are running a business, whether you like it or not. You are responsible for the livelihoods of many, many people, and you don't have the luxury of just doing all the things that got you here. You need to figure out what's going to get you there and sustain this business. So I think there is that need for people to understand the business, and it doesn't have to be an intimidating thing. We're not teaching, you're not going back to school to get an MBA. I think it is just a general understanding of saying, here's how the capital markets works, here's how lending, here's how deal structures work, here's how capital structures work. I mean, all the different parts that is like super intimidating if you've never seen it before and don't understand it. But it's like, that's okay. We were all there. No one was born knowing these things. None of us went to school for this stuff. We had to ask someone. Here we are, ask. And we'll walk you through it. And if you don't get it the first and second time, that's okay. We'll spend time with you on the third and fourth and fifth time, but you will get it because you need to get it. So I think that's so critical for especially these cohorts that you're talking about, just to have the frequency and building those relationships locally to where you can just pick up the phone and feel comfortable saying, okay, what would you do in this situation? I mean, the fellowship that we have through the Birth and Giants is great, but it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We get to see each other every 6 months, and it's fantastic. But then life gets back in the way as soon as we go home and we get back into our regular routine. So I love the maintenance side of what you're able to bring to these different communities and to these entrepreneurs.
Well, here's the flip side of this, Rufus, and I see this daily. I'm not kidding, daily, is that there are now thousands of capital, they call them capital allocators. It's a private equity firm. They've raised, $100 million and they're looking for $100 million worth of investments in the next 5 years. And so they interview people every day and they read business plans and they take meetings. When they see something they like, which usually they like because they see financial opportunity on some sort of arbitrage. I can buy this for $1 million, do this, and this to it and sell it for $2 million. That's how they look at the world. But here's I don't know if it's a dirty secret or not. You know what they're looking for? They're looking for business owners who misunderstand capitalism. So that when you say I can buy this for $1 million and turn it into something worth $2 million, they're saying, I think I can underpay for this. I think this business owner is not going to understand how I'm paying them. I'm going to pay them less than it's worth. And then I'm going to do these things to it that they could have done, but I know how to do. And by the time I'm done, I will sell it for $2 million. And I see this daily, that entrepreneurs misunderstand this transactional moment, and they, whatever they've built, which is usually 10 or 20 years worth of work, is in the end, it's undervalued. They end up in a sort of an unholy relationship with the wrong kind of partner. And I'm not saying they don't make millions of dollars, by the way, which is worth saying out loud. They make millions, but they don't make tens of millions, or they make a half of what they would have made otherwise if they just understood capitalism better.
But the way you're approaching it too is that you're bringing founder-friendly capital and making those connections. So it's not always an all or none transaction. A lot of times it could be even a minority stake of this private equity investor saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy it for 2 million and sell it for 4 million." Well, guess what? You still own that other capital. You didn't sell it all to them. So if they can do that for their ownership and their percentage, they're also doing it for yours. So even if you sold 50% of the company, you're still in a much better place by the time they're ready to sell it. So why would you deny yourself that? Because I think people are like, oh, and I know why. And that's just part of what your mission is too, is that you're debunking the myths and the boogeyman persona of what private equity is. And there is that side of private equity that is ugly and nasty and stuff that we see in the headlines. But there's another more founder-friendly side of it that is not necessarily out to get you.
For sure. It's just, you just have to know how to work it better than the typical business owner does. And, the future, this is, I mentioned to you before we got live, as I said, maybe we'll talk about blockchain, but I mean, that's a whole other segment. So I don't know if we should do that, but all I can tell you is the concept of liquidity, these conversations, again, you have to imagine little 14-year-old version of me. I'm working at a video store, which we don't have video stores anymore, but I'm working at a video store in Manhattan, and my customers are all Wall Streeters. And so, I'm a curious kid, and I ask them about how they make money and everything. And that world, and even to this day, the world of how money moves is incredibly complicated. And it's this thing called blockchain, which is a whole other conversation, but we are trying to be at the forefront. What's that?
You can go there.
Well, basically, the banking system, this is going to sound a little conspiratorial, but I don't mean it. The banking system, that group of Wall Streeters that I grew up with, they make money by essentially handling and managing money. And they add value along the way, not as much as I think they do, but they do add value. And so they make you fill out forms, and they make you do this and that, and they do all this checking. The blockchain is this thing where you take AI and you take public ledgers and you put them together, meaning what it takes a person today, a form with a back office and an underwriting process to do, can be done instantly. And instead of it taking 5 hours of valuable people's time, it takes pennies to do. So that industry is in for a huge change, but the benefit to the entrepreneur, if you stop using the word entrepreneur, call yourself a capitalist, is that how capital moves is changing very, very quickly. So I still believe what those early Wall Streeters said to me when I was a kid, which is that they are the lubricant to all the businesses out there in the world. They make the gears work without grinding and heating up and catching on fire. But that world is getting better, easier, faster. And so if you say to yourself, hey, I take on risk, right? I see something that's risky, a software solution that's never been built before, or a HVAC service that's never been in my town, or that could be done better in my town. And you say, I'm going to take on that risk. You need that capital to lubricate what you're doing. And the way you access it's going to get better and faster. And the way you eventually turn that enterprise back into cash, so that you can go live on the Riviera, is going to get better and faster. And it's probably the place of the greatest innovation for the next 10 years. So I definitely want our entrepreneurs in Birthing a Giants, who, as I say, are practicing capitalists that don't fully understand capitalism, to understand what's happening with forget the fancy word blockchain. It's how money moves. And money can move to help you fund your enterprise for the next 30 days. And money can move to buy your enterprise from you and move it to the next owner. And you described minority investing. There are so many mechanisms now. And business owners who say, I'm going to treat this the way I treated everything else, which is I'm going to treat, rely on the school of hard knocks to do it. They're just getting their clock cleaned in this environment. So that's the sort of angry part of Birthing a Giant is I don't want to see any more founders get their clock cleaned the way they are so often.
Yep. No, that's great. Well, let's go ahead and start closing it up. I guess to just answer one last question and we can end on this, but how do you see your own exit? And it may be in multiple ways, and obviously we don't know how that's going to happen, but what do you see for yourself with either the organization or any of the other ventures you have?
Yeah. So Birthing a Giant is this amazing group of people who come together to really make their businesses more value, full stop. But there's so many opportunities that come out of it. So we do fundraising rounds to help some of the business owners that are moving into a more capital intensive experience. We are very much looking for a way right now. I mean, we're making really good progress on being the liquidity provider to a business owner. Okay, what does that mean? It means you run a business, you have 10 million in revenue, you have all sorts of things you can do with that business, ranging from running it the way you've been running it to selling the whole thing to selling part of it. We are in a category, Birthing a Giant is in a category called growth assistance. We help you grow. And so the business owner that wants to liquefy 10% of their company or get the capital to grow 10, by exchanging 10% of their company, I think we can do that for them. Now take a room full of business owners, and now you're going to say, what if each of us took 10% of our equity, or in some equitable way and put it into a new entity? And now I own a fraction of 10 other companies in the Birthing a Giants community, right. But I've created some liquidity for myself. I've created some diversification. There's some tax advantages to doing this. And it's all just about capital moving. But I'll tell you this much, if you come into Birthing a Giants and you join one of these, you liquefy part of your business and you sync up with 10 other businesses to do this, you better be ready to become a better capitalist.
Right.
Because now you got all these other businesses that are counting on each of us to become better understanders of how capital moves. And we will help. We're there to make it happen. But you got to learn. So the liquefaction of what is called the lower middle market, right? That's what we all play in, the lower middle market. The liquefaction of the lower middle market is going to create the exit for Birthing a Giants, because growth assistance will have liquidity added to it. Growth assistance plus liquidity.
I see it very clearly, and I know we've had conversations about this, and I would love to see how this continues to grow, because I think that's a great way to slowly take your chips off the table, and in doing so, diversify into other companies that we collectively believe is a good company to own. So you really are getting the due diligence of all these great business owners in this community. You're leveraging that risk. You're mitigating it by leveraging the wisdom of people in the group. And
that is the nature of risk, is you take it on and then you mitigate it. You take it on, then you mitigate it. You take it on. Smart. And I want your audience to know that I count on you, because you're a level-headed source of wisdom that does understand the capital markets. Mm-hmm. So, I talk to you about this now and again because I need your insight.
I try to save as many as I can, but my goodness, getting business owners to get out of their own way and shut up and listen for a second is not easy. Just getting business owners to think about their business as a business is hard enough. They don't really see the enterprise value opportunities the way I do, and the exit strategies. So all I can do is just share stories, share experiences, share wisdom. And if it serves them, they take it. If not, they discard it. So save as many as I can. Yeah, Lewis, it's been fun. And of course I can talk for hours, but we don't have that luxury of time. So we'll just have to do it again sometime if you're open to it. And but like I said, this is I figured we should just record this, because this is the kind of conversations we're having anyway, just randomly. I'm like, we got to stop doing this randomly and just start formally putting it on video, because these are too good for other people not to enjoy. So thank you for not disappointing. Exceeding expectations by all means. But now this has been a fun episode.
Thank you, sir.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Constructive Interference. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow visionary. Keep dreaming big, and remember, the only limits are the ones you set for yourself. Until next time, stay sharp.